At this time, we have both Mrs. Whitley and Dr. Yeomans are going to come and present to us. As many of you know, we made some changes to our research paper guidelines for the different disciplines we have in the school, and they have done a ton of work over the summer to kind of make things easier for us.
Good morning. Actually got a response. That's better than most of my classes. That's good. Okay. Should I stand at a certain distance or does it matter? Okay. Well, I'm going to try and speak loud enough. I tend to talk quietly, so excuse me if you can't hear me in the back row, just shout. I think everybody knows me, but there's a couple faces I'm not super familiar with. So Becca Whitley, nice to meet y'all. I've been here for 8 years. Got reminded of that this morning from Dr. Christmas, and it made me feel old. So anyway, also Dr. Yeomans is passing around some handouts. These are not the research paper guidelines, by the way, but just some example things that we wanted to show you. So we'll also post these onto Populi in the in-service section. So if you would prefer the electronic copies, you'll get them one way or another. Dr. Yeomans joined the English department in January, and I'm very thankful for her and all the work she's helped me with this summer too. So I just wanted to introduce her since she is newer. All right, he already gave a little bit of context, but as he mentioned, big changes. In the 8 years that I've been here, we've always used Turabian, but we voted as a faculty to switch to allow professors to use the citation tools that are fitting for their areas. So APA, MLA, Chicago, Turabian, whatever is fitting for your area. So we worked hard this summer to try and give you some tools to help you, because obviously we're having to adjust even our English classes. When we would always teach Turabian, now we're teaching MLA because that's English and literature, which means those of you in other areas won't necessarily have students that have learned APA or Turabian. And so we want you to feel confident to be able to help them in those areas. So if you will indulge me, I have a brief exercise I want to start with. You need both of your hands for this exercise and your honesty. So quick question. On a scale of 1 to 10, just use your fingers. How confident do you personally feel citing your own research when you are writing? Scale of 1 to 10, how confident do you personally feel if you're writing something, citing your own research correctly in your papers?
In the style
that you're familiar, that you use in your area. Yeah, so 1 to 10, show me with your fingers how confident you personally feel. Wow, I'm impressed. Okay, so I've got everything from 7s, 8, 9s. Okay, so second question, same style here. On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident do you feel teaching somebody else in your research style how to do those things correctly? Teaching somebody else. Wow, lots of 10s. Some people went down a little bit. Okay, 5, 4. All right, so my goal is to hopefully, if there is a gap between those two, bridge that. Because many of us, we know how to do it, but I've many times heard people say, well, I'm not an English teacher, so I don't know how to teach somebody to write. But since many of you are very confident in your own style, hopefully we can help you bridge the gap to be able to teach them as well. And you'll find that a lot of it, I find, is instinctual. You know what looks good in your writing, you know how to do it yourself. And so just teaching what works for you is often what works for the students too. So we want to help you bridge that gap and inform you on that as well. Think back, if you will, however long ago it was, to when you learned to write. Again, however long ago that was. Okay, so when you were learning to write, where did most of those writing skills come from? Classes, what kind of classes, what kind of teachers, perhaps even from yourself? You'll find that many of us, we learned how to write at least the basics, grammar, sentence structures, organization, essays, and all of that in a dedicated writing classroom, at least at the start. But curriculum is shifting now to content areas doing more teaching of writing skills. Because a lot of times in an English class, we learn an essay, but then they go to business and have to write a proposal. And they may know how to write a sentence, may or may not, but they may not necessarily know how to write a report. And so you really need to be able to teach those writing skills for your area, for your content area. So again, we want to be able to help you bridge that gap if you don't feel confident in those areas. So let's go ahead and jump right in here. Really in all classes, you want, or we teach both how to learn to write, but we also teach to write to learn. We learn both in classes, to learn to write and to write to learn. And really, if you know how to learn to write, if you can write, then you can also write to learn. And then as we research things, especially, they're learning as they're writing. And that's a goal that saves us a lot of time in class. So we don't have to teach every little piece of the textbook. So hopefully we'll be able to do that. All right, so we're going to start with some, basically just the guidelines. We originally had just one, if you remember, research paper guideline document. So what we did this summer was we have divided those up. And these are going to be under the shared files on Populi. I'll show you how to find them in a second here. But we've divided that document up into 4. So the first document is teaching research, essentially. So in this, we've covered a brief overview of the different citation styles and the differences between them. So that's a big one. There's a chart in there that I'll show you. We've covered how to avoid plagiarism, what it is, how to not do it. And then we also covered the research writing process for students who perhaps are not as familiar with everything that goes into writing a good research paper. Also some general style guide. So all of that is in this document titled Research Guidelines. So more of a teaching tool. And you can just use it as a resource for students, refer to it, not necessarily having to teach all of that in class. And then the other 3 documents are specific to different citations. So there's one for APA, there's one for MLA, there's one for Turabian/Chicago style. So in each of these guides, we have covered, of course, how to cite, what components are required in that, and then also sample citations for different types, similar to how it was in Turabian, but now, of course, we have different citation tools. Of course, these are summaries of the handbooks and manuals. So I would still encourage students to refer to the handbooks and manuals. They really, we don't have space to cover everything that's in there. So just a summary document, really. And you'll notice that even in the Turabian one, there are some updates that are current to the 9th edition. So I would encourage you to just at least look over those. Can you help me switch to Populi? Courtesy of not using my own computer, I don't know how to adjust things. So I just want to show you where to go to find these on Populi, especially for those that are newer.
Put you back whenever you're ready. Oh, it worked here, but don't work.
Share a different screen.
Well, I have to, yeah. Dr. Crawford, you said computer 1, right?
This one says 2 and that one says 1.
Oh my gosh.
The one that should be working. That remote that worked, so.
Maybe I won't try. We can just cover it.
So the PowerPoint isn't working? It doesn't make any sense. I don't understand that. It's only showing PowerPoint. It won't show anything else.
All right, I will not show you that. However, if you go to the top of Populi, you guys are, most of you are familiar with this anyways, go to the top of Populi, you'll see instead of home, go to files. Under files on the left side, you'll see options, go to shared. And then it's in the folder that is called student policies. You're going to see that folder has grown significantly because there's a ton of documents in there. So there's the 4 that we have listed up here. And then there's also that last bullet point. I put in some templates that are just to help students format their papers correctly. So there are 2 templates for APA, 2 for MLA, and 2 for Turabian. And the reason why I put 2 for each is I personally use Arial font, but many also use Times New Roman. So I just did 2 templates, 1 for each. I use Arial just because it's easier to view on Populate. Most guidelines give you flexibility to do that. So those are tools you can use. And you can also, if you want, download the templates and adjust them how you like it, because many of the guidelines give you that flexibility. You know, I want my footnotes to be XYZ, and you know, I want them in 10-point font instead of 12. I want my numbers to look like this, my page numbers, or maybe you want them to put the word count in the heading or something like that to make it easier for you. You can definitely use those templates however you want. They are fillable forms. If you would prefer not to have that, of course, you can change that. But just, again, all of these are just tools. We're trying to help bridge that gap. So feel free to use them as you see fit. Okay, main thing I think really for students is just to let them know what you expect, because if they have clear expectations, then they can rise to those. But if they're guessing, that's a problem. A few other useful resources I find to help bridge the gap for students and help them learn to write is, and many of these you're probably already utilizing, but we have a great resource, Brainfuse Tutoring. How many of you guys actually have this, or have students that have used Brainfuse in your classes? Grand total of 1. Okay. So Brainfuse, if you don't know, is a tutoring service that's free for our students. If you go to the links section, students have use of this. I'm sure, Tony, you'll probably use this many times to refer for students. There's 2 options for Brainfuse. There's the live help, and they have 24/7 live help in many different areas. It's not just writing. There's business. I know there's math. There's all kinds of things. I think there's history. I could be wrong on that. Okay, so check and see if they have your subject field, and especially for those procrastinator students, 24/7 help is great. So that's live help. And then of course the writing lab, it takes them about a day to process papers, but they give very extensive feedback. So if you don't personally feel confident giving students extensive feedback on their papers, then send them over here. I like to remind students a couple days before the final deadline for a paper that if they want to submit it to the writing lab, to go ahead and do that now. And just that little bit of reminder that, hey, go ahead and do this. That's super helpful for students. So I would encourage you to utilize Brainfuse if you're not already, and put that as a link on Populate. Yes.
Just a question on the previous slide.
Mhm.
I used the live help for some classes, but for the student paper, what's the turnaround time?
24 hours, yeah, which is pretty fast. But if there's, no, that's okay. If there's a lot of work that they need to do once they get the feedback back, then just 24 hours before the final deadline for a class is really not enough time. So that's why I try and remind students at least 2 days before the final deadline to do it then. Yeah. Okay, so that's Brainfuse. Again, I would encourage you to put that as a link on your classes if you don't already have that. Another great resource that many schools already use, and you probably maybe have used yourself, is Purdue OWL. How many of you guys have used Purdue OWL before? Yeah, so they have so many great resources on there, teaching helps, plagiarism stuff, tutorials, and then of course citations in all of the different styles. So I will oftentimes refer students to Purdue OWL. Super easy tool to use. Oh, here's a list of all the things they have, but it's kind of small. So even have general writing information. They have some ESL stuff too. They have a great list of resources there. Okay, next one, citation generators. I love and I hate these. I say they are really great. I just listed a couple on here, but there's so many. You could go to specific areas. CiteThisForMe.com, MyBib.com. You probably have some that you've used too. So these, of course, are great tools for students. A good starting place, I would say. They're not foolproof, though. Sometimes you'll type in, a book or a website or something, they'll create a citation and it's wrong. So I always encourage students to use it as a starting point, and then to check the citation that it creates against the handbook to make sure that, capitalization is right, punctuation's right, has all the right information, that sort of thing. So again, you can put this as a link on Populi and even show students how to use them. Learn has a citation tool, if you didn't know this. If you go to a article on Learn, I just pulled up some random one, in the corner, you'll see a little cite button. When you click on that, it creates something that looks like this, where you can select what kind of citation style you're using, and then it will create the citation for you. Again, not foolproof. There are mistakes many times when this happens, but it's a good starting point for students. Again, compare this to the handbook to make sure you have things correctly cited correctly. So again, good tool. I will say it doesn't have Turabian, the latest updated one. So like I said, love it and hate it, but Learn has some good citation tools. Also, another tool that I didn't even realize we all have is Microsoft Word has templates, and they have citation tools already built into Microsoft Word, which all students have access to as students. So the templates, if you just search on the home page or the new document page on Word for research paper, you'll see things like this that pop up. There's one for MLA style, there's one for APA style. So if you don't want to use the fillable forms that I put on Populi, have students use this. Again, I think the more resources they have, the better. So those are good templates. And then another one, I will say this one's a little bit outdated, but the references tab on Word, if you look under just references, sort of in the middle, you'll see where you go to insert a citation. There's different styles. You can change it from APA to MLA. And it will actually already create your bibliography for you too. They don't have the most updated version of APA, but they do have some good starting points. Like I said, a lot of these are starting points, and then you just have to make sure they're doing the work to check from there. Okay, so Microsoft Word templates, and a couple that are not, oh, sorry, last one here, and I would encourage you to do this, just really puts the onus on the students, is to add the appropriate handbook as a either optional or required text for your class. I know your classes are not English classes, but that doesn't mean they don't need those handbooks. And I would say if we're all doing that, then by the time they get to senior year or upperclassmen, they're prepared, they have that handbook ready for if they go on for higher education from there, or for master's or something like that. So again, puts the onus on the students. We will have, and I checked with Dr. Lucy this morning, the correct handbooks in the library as well. Right now, we have the most updated one for APA and for Turabian, but we don't have the most updated one for MLA. That I think that only affects us. So we'll get it eventually. But we're hoping to have at least a couple copies of both handbooks in the library. So if it's an optional book or a required book, at least students won't necessarily have to purchase it. They can just go use it in the library when they need it. One less thing they have to buy. But I would encourage you to add those, like I said, to each of your classes that will use them. All right, at this point, I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Yeomans. She's going to give us just a little bit more on how to help students bridge that gap to be able to write themselves.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Whitley. I appreciate her. I am new, so it might be a little stumbling here. Forgive me. So guiding students in their writing, you have your handouts in front of you. I'm not sure if they're in the right order, but I will let you know which one to take a look at when I get to them. So the first bullet is provide example papers for your students. If you have them, have the guidebooks, those books have examples, and our guidelines have examples as well. So they're already on Populi, and you can just have them refer to those guidelines as well as the guidebooks, if you will, for example papers, or you can find your own example papers if you like. Scaffold the writing process. So take that handout. It's the circular one, with the writing process in the middle on it. This is very important. Scaffolding, making things more accommodating for the different learning levels is very, very important because every student is not on the same level of writing as well as researching, and you have to scaffold that. Okay, that's what the top of the handout looks like. You will probably not go over every step in the writing process, or you may combine steps in the writing process. In our department, we usually combine steps. For instance, you may ask the students to give you an assignment where they do the thesis statement within the outline. Okay, that's 2 steps in pre-writing. And then you may ask, let me go back, them to do a drafting, which is your rough draft, and then either the final draft, not either or, and the final draft. Okay, so I need my notes here. So yeah, you don't have to do every step. You will decide what step to do. And you will have work days, or I should say combine every step or some steps. Set guided work days for research and citations, if you will. We in the English department have work days. For instance, a lot of students have trouble getting started with just writing a thesis statement. And so you can have a day where they actually write it in class. They may bring in that thesis already prepared, and then you could go around and make sure that they have written it correctly, or that they know what they want to write about. Because again, some students have writer's block at the very beginning, believe it or not. As well as for citations, with doing a bibliography first, they could do that. It's up to you to set those guided work days. And then once they've written their rough draft, you may want to help lessen the grading load, if you will, or lessen that grading load by having them do peer reviews. That's a second handout that you all have. So let's take a look at that one. Peer reviews are wonderful because it, again, helps you to not have to grade as much. But before you can have your students grade, you have to teach them what to grade and how to grade, what to look at in terms of content. If you're asking for 800 words or 500 words, yes, you can tell them that they don't have to count every word. They can count the number of lines and then multiply that by an average line. If you want that 500 words. You could show them and you have a rubric. We have rubrics throughout Populi. You can, I don't know if we have rubrics already uploaded or that we can make available to everyone.
There's the general composition one, but I would encourage you to make it specific to your assignment because most students don't really even fully understand what the highest level of writing really looks like. So make it really specific for them. You have to have 2 examples of this or whatever. Mm-hmm.
I've learned that rubrics really set the stage for what you expect. So it's great to always have that rubric and let students know that that's the first thing they should look at other than the directions. If you have what's in the rubric, you can get that A that you want. If you don't follow the rubric, well, you all know about that with evaluations. If you don't follow that rubric, you don't get the grade. You don't get the score that you want. So you have another handout that has grading abbreviations and proofreading marks. Raise your hand if you use these. Okay. Shorthand measures to grade. Teach your students, introduce your students to these proofreading marks, and they can use them when they're doing the peer reviews because yes, they will fill out that rubric or that whatever form you have, but you want them to know, and the best way to know is to teach or use it yourself. So teach them those proofreading marks. The most common ones, subject verb agreement, run-ons, fragments. Yes, because that's one of the things that they should know by the time that they leave here. And here's an example or the actual handout. Okay, it's pretty small here, which is why you have the handout in front of you. All right, moving on to address common mistakes in the class. That's a way to grade in general. After they've done the peer review, I usually have students, after I've done the grading, I will give a lecture just on those common mistakes. Most students have subject verb agreement errors. Most students have fragments or run-ons, or they don't give the right amount of content. So again, those are examples of those common mistakes. Address them in general, as well as you could do the one-on-one conferences that we talked about in our session yesterday. So what will students know after completing ENC 1101 and 1102? They will know about plagiarism, recycling, and fabrication. Let's hope that they're not still trying to do that or doing that at your level when they get to you, but they definitely know about those things and not to do those things when they are in ENC 1101 and 1102. General requirements for citing sources in all citation types. Yes, they're going to be introduced to the three that Mrs. Whitley talked about, but for us, they're only responsible for MLA. So it's up to you. If you know APA is your guide that you need to let them know about, to teach them, to have them be ready for that master's program that they may enter into, or that PhD program that they may enter into. The research writing process, they'll know that. They will know that parenthetical citations need to be within the paper, and there needs to be a works cited page at the end. They will know that MLA does not require a cover sheet, but if their professor asks for one, they have to give that cover sheet. The Learn library, they will know about that. They will also know that, and I usually start with Learn library, they will also know that if Learn doesn't have it, that they could go to Google Scholar, they could go to JSTOR, they could go to EBSCO or EBSCO. There are other alternatives for the scholarly research that they need. And general writing terms, such as the beginning of the paper, their cover sheet, the parenthetical citations that I talked about, along with transitions, and of course, a thesis statement. Every paper has to have a thesis statement. If it doesn't, is it a paper? No. Okay. They need to know that. Okay. And they will know that when they leave ENC 1101 and 1102. And those common errors that I spoke about earlier, the run-ons, the comma splices, the fragments, the subject verb agreement, the pronoun agreement errors, the dangling modifiers, awkward sentence structure, and formal writing problems. I find that a lot of students are still thinking that they can use you in their professional, formal academic writing. That's a no-no. You all know that, and we just want them to continue to do that when they're in your classes. Okay. We can't guarantee that they'll remember everything that we teach them, okay? But just know that we want you all to have them actively practice writing using research and writing using the appropriate style that correlates with their major. Keep in mind that those who transferred, such as the dual enrollment students, may not have been exposed to what we're I see it, no, to what we're teaching. So you have to work with them. You have to teach some of the things that they didn't get in ENC 1101 or 1102, or just go by the guidelines that we have in terms of what goes in the paper. Those citations need to be within, as well as a works cited page and reference page at the end, so forth and so on. They need a clear beginning and middle and end, for a paper. There's no such thing as a one paragraph essay. Have you all gotten that before? Yeah, I know you have. Okay. All right. Okay. So are there any questions? You all, I know you're very talented. I know you may be doing some of these things already. So do you have any questions? Do you have any advice that you would like to offer? Yes.
Just a question. Well, one, this is great. I'm writing a couple articles on
Okay.
A question on the peer review checklist, but I see this application in a lot of other areas too. Do you just take this and go grade book, or do you use this to help you do your separate grading? I'm just curious how you convert this.
Well,
assessment.
I give a participation grade. If the students do it, they get a grade for doing it, but I don't really use it to grade the students on that actual paper. I grade the paper. I want them to actively participate in doing the assignment and completing every aspect that I have on here. And that way they're learning how to write and writing to learn. Okay.
And the other comment for business, it was always so what there's rest your language, a lot of assignments that for business classes. So I don't want to give them bad habits either. So definitely like to just work with them on that.
Of course. Yes.
I was gonna mention, like, I'm not cutting it anything, but I was gonna just mention that, obviously we only have 30 minutes, and we've already used that time, but
Yeah.
we're so happy to help. And these are really just examples, like the 2 peer review ones that you see in front of you are just examples. Please change and tailor them. Something you could do, do you guys use the peer review file? Like when you create an assignment on Populi, there's a way to create a peer review assignment. So students can review other students' files. When you do that and they're commenting on there, what you could do is create a document where they have to check things, and then they can just upload that document there as part of their comment too, or you can just do it in class, like print these out and go from there. But again, when you create those peer review checklists, make them specific to your assignment.
Yeah.
Do you have a thesis statement and does it have an arguable position? Whatever your assignment is, does it have a so what and who cares in the assignment? And I find that you really just have to teach the students what good writing looks like. You have to model it for them because they will easily say, looks good, great job. I like what you said in paragraph 3, and that's all they will say.
Right.
You can't just leave it at that. You have to give them
Yeah, very good. You have to give them cues on what to do. Like Ms. Whitley said, samples. And I want to go back to the very beginning. I like to give students questions where they just answer the questions, and that's a thesis statement. They may not, they may have trouble. So I give them as many cues as possible at the very beginning, and then, loosen the reins later, if you will. Yes.
Yes, could you, on the slideshow, please?
Sure.
I'm going to incorporate a still part of this.
Sure. No, we're giving it. You don't have to steal. We're giving it.
Yeah, so what we'll do is put it under the in-service folder. Wherever that is. Okay, so we're gonna put it this way.
All right. You're welcome. Yes.
One of the websites I use a lot is Purdue Without.
Uh-huh. Yeah, we said it. Yeah. We love it. We love Purdue. OWL or OWL. Yes. Yeah, we have a slide in the PowerPoint of it. Yes.
Yeah, you're good.
Any other question? I think we're over our time. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, guys.
I know you guys are all wonderful teachers and are doing a lot of this already. So if you guys have other advice too that works for your classes, then we'll pass it along.
Thank you. You're the frontline approach. So thank you. That's a lot for good success. Best you can.